I never imagined at 43 years old I'd be putting my childhood home up for sale. But sometimes, life forces your hand, showing you exactly where you stand in other people's priorities. This is the story of how I reclaimed my worth, my future, and ultimately, my peace. My name is Elizabeth Chen. After 20 years climbing the corporate ladder at Meridian Financial Services, I've built a respectable career as a senior financial analyst. I'm known for my meticulous attention to detail and ability to anticipate market shifts. My colleagues respect me. My bosses value me. Outside work, though, I'd allowed myself to become something of a ghost in my own life. 3 years ago, everything changed when my father, Richard, suffered a massive heart attack. He survived, but the medical bills devastated my parents' already precarious finances. Dad had to retire early from his construction business, which had been struggling since the recession. Mom, Patricia, had only ever worked part-time at the FI local library, more for social connection than financial necessity. Their savings evaporated quickly. When they called me that rainy Tuesday evening, their voices strained with embarrassment. I didn't hesitate. I was single, financially stable, and had been saving for my own place. The decision seemed obvious. Family comes first. Of course I'll help, I told them. I can move back home temporarily and help cover expenses until you're back on your feet. The relief in their voices was palpable. Mom cried. Dad, never comfortable with emotional displays, cleared his throat repeatedly and mumbled thanks. I sublet my apartment and moved back into my childhood bedroom that weekend. It was small, the pale blue paint faded, and my old twin bed made my back ache, but it felt right somehow. Helping family always does, doesn't it? Within a month, it became clear that my bedroom wouldn't work long term. Dad's cardiologist had recommended he avoid stairs when possible, so my parents had moved to the ground floor guest room. I took over the master bedroom upstairs, which they insisted upon. I renovated the connected sitting area into a small home office, investing nearly $8,000 of my savings to make the space functional for remote work. The financial arrangement was straightforward. I would cover the mortgage, $2,200 monthly, utilities, averaging $450, property taxes, $6,800 annually, insurance, $20,400 annually, and contribute significantly to groceries and household expenses. We agreed it would be temporary, just until Dad's health stabilized and they could reorganize their finances. 6 months, a year at most, Mom had said confidently. I set up automatic transfers for all the bills and settled into a new routine. Monday through Friday, I worked remotely from my upstairs office, occasionally driving into the city for important meetings. Evenings, I'd cook dinner, often something heart-healthy for Dad. Weekends, I'd help Mom with yard work or drive Dad to his cardiac rehab appointments. My social life dwindled. Friends invited me out less as I declined more. Dating became complicated. How do you explain to potential partners that you live with your parents, but you're actually the one supporting them? Most men I met couldn't see past the surface arrangement to understand the complexity beneath. The first year passed quickly. Dad's health improved gradually, though not to the point where he could return to physically demanding work. He found part-time employment as a consultant for a small construction firm, enough to keep him busy and restore some of his pride, but the income was modest. I'm bringing in something now, he announced proudly one evening, sliding an envelope across the dining table. Inside was $400. You can reduce your contribution, I smiled, tucking the envelope into my purse. That's great, Dad. Let's put this toward your medical expenses. The envelope became a monthly ritual, though the amount never increased. And somehow, despite this income and Mom's library salary, the financial responsibility remained entirely mine. By the 18-month mark, I began to notice subtle shifts in our family dynamic. My parents stopped consulting me about household decisions despite my financial contributions. The dining room was repainted without discussion. The landscaping service I'd hired was canceled because Mom preferred to do it herself. Yet I found myself pulling weeds most weekends. Minor irritations accumulated. Mom would rearrange my carefully organized kitchen cupboards. Dad would adjust the thermostat without mentioning it, leading to unexpected utility spikes. When I installed a small lock on my office door after finding my tax documents tidied into random folders, Mom was offended. "We've never locked doors in this house," she said, lips pursed in disapproval. "I have confidential work documents," I explained. "It's a liability issue." She never acknowledged the real issue, my growing need for boundaries and respect. The 2-year mark came and went without any discussion of changing our arrangement. By then, it had calcified into something unspoken, but understood. I was the financial bedrock of the household. When I broached the subject of eventually moving out and finding my own place, my suggestions were met with vague responses and subject changes. "The housing market is terrible right now," Dad would say. "You're saving so much by living here," Mom would add. Neither acknowledged that I was saving nothing. My once healthy investment portfolio had stagnated. My retirement contributions had been reduced to the minimum required to receive employer matching. The down payment fund for my own home had been depleted by household emergencies and renovations to our home. Then came last Christmas. My parents always hosted a large family gathering on Christmas Eve, a tradition that had grown from intimate family dinners to an elaborate open house with extended family, neighbors, and friends cycling through from afternoon into evening. This year was no different, except that I had funded the entire event, from the catering to the decorations to the modest gifts placed under the tree for nieces, nephews, and godchildren. I had spent weeks helping prepare, taking time off work to deep clean the house, wrap presents, and coordinate the catering. The party was in full swing, the house filled with the comfortable chaos of familiar voices when I overheard my mother talking to my Aunt Susan in the kitchen. "It'll be so nice having Amber here," Mom said, referring to my 26-year-old cousin, who had recently graduated with her master's degree in education. "She's having such a hard time finding affordable housing near her new school." I paused in the hallway, wineglass in hand, not intentionally eavesdropping, but caught by the enthusiasm in my mother's voice, an enthusiasm I hadn't heard directed at any of my accomplishments in years. "Where will she stay?" Aunt Susan asked. "Your house is already full with the 3 of you." "She'll take the master bedroom, of course," Mom replied casually, as if discussing the weather. "It has the best light and that lovely sitting area Elizabeth turned into an office. It'll be perfect for Amber to grade papers and prepare lessons." I froze, the Cabernet suddenly bitter on my tongue. The master bedroom, my bedroom, the one I had renovated with my own money while paying for the privilege of keeping this house out of foreclosure. "What about Elizabeth?" Aunt Susan asked, apparently more concerned about my living situation than my own mother was. "Oh, she'll have to move out," Mom said with a dismissive wave. "It's time anyway. She's in her 40s. She should have her own place by now. Her living here was always meant to be temporary." I stood there, invisible in the hallway, as they continued discussing Amber's moving plans, how they'd repaint my room, too sterile and businesslike, replace the office furniture I had bought, too modern for the house's character, and turn it into a proper creative space for Amber. "She's family too," Mom continued, unaware I could hear every word. "And she actually needs our help. Elizabeth is established. She just got comfortable here. This arrangement has gone on far too long." I must have made a noise because they both turned and saw me standing there. My mother's expression shifted from surprise to defensiveness in an instant. "You have to move out," she announced loudly, as if making it official by saying it to my face. "Amber will live in your room." The party seemed to quiet around us. I could feel eyes turning our way, conversations pausing as relatives sensed the tension. "Are you serious?" I managed to keep my voice steady despite the anger and hurt swirling inside me. "I've been paying all the bills for 3 years. My parents Exchanged a look before Dad joined us, positioning himself beside Mom in a united front against me. "We appreciate that, Elizabeth," he said, his tone condescending. "But it's our house. And Amber needs help right now. She's just starting out." I looked around at the faces of family members, some uncomfortable, others curious, a few even nodding in agreement with my parents. In that moment, I realized how the narrative had been spun. I wasn't the dutiful daughter helping her parents through financial hardship. I was the middle-aged spinster who wouldn't leave the nest. The injustice of it burned in my chest, but years of professional training had taught me never to show vulnerability in a hostile room. I simply set down my wine glass on the nearest table, straightened my shoulders, and walked upstairs to my room, the room that, apparently, would soon be Amber's. I didn't come down for the remainder of the party. I could hear the laughter, the Christmas music, the clinking of glasses continuing without me. Around midnight, the house finally quieted. I heard my parents' bedroom door close downstairs. Only then did I allow myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. 3 years of financial sacrifice, 3 years of putting my life on hold, 3 years of shrinking myself to fit into their home again, only to be discarded the moment something more interesting came along. I opened my laptop and began reviewing my finances. The numbers were stark. I had spent over $120,000 maintaining this household. My investment portfolio had stagnated. My retirement projections showed I'd need to work an additional 5 years to maintain the same standard of living in retirement. And what had I received in return? Certainly not gratitude, certainly not respect. As I scrolled through bank statements, an email notification popped up, a monthly newsletter from my company's legal department that I normally ignored. This one had a subject line that caught my attention. Property law update, quiet title actions, and adverse possession. Curious. I opened it. Most of it was typical legal jargon, but one paragraph stood out. It mentioned that in cases where one person pays the mortgage, taxes, and maintenance costs for a property titled to another, under certain circumstances, they might have grounds for a legal interest in the property. I remembered something then, a TCI detail from 3 years ago that I had almost forgotten. When I first moved back to help my parents, their mortgage had been underwater. The bank had required refinancing to avoid foreclosure, but my parents' credit scores and reduced income made them ineligible. As the financial analyst in the family, I had proposed a solution, transferring the deed temporarily to me, using my credit score and income to secure better terms, with the understanding that it would be transferred back once their situation stabilized. They had readily agreed. We'd gone to a notary, signed the paperwork, and I had become the legal owner of 1427 Maple Avenue. At the time, I had offered to transfer it back once the refinancing was complete, but Dad had said there was no rush. Mom had agreed it made sense to leave things as they were until they were back on their feet. 3 years later, the deed remained in my name. The house was legally mine. I closed my laptop, a strange calm settling over me. I wasn't being evicted from my parents' home. They were living in my house. The next morning, Christmas Day, my parents acted as if the previous night's confrontation hadn't happened. Mom made her traditional cinnamon rolls. Dad read the newspaper in his recliner. No one mentioned Amber or moving out. I excused myself after breakfast, saying I needed to pick up a few things at the store. Instead, I drove to the home improvement warehouse on the edge of town, one of the few places open on Christmas Day. I bought a 4-foot piece of plywood, white paint, and a paintbrush. Back in the car, I called my friend Jennifer, an attorney, specializing in real estate law. "Merry Christmas," she answered cheerfully. "Everything okay?" "I need a quick legal opinion," I said, explaining the situation, both the deed transfer and last night's demand that I move out. Her response was immediate and certain. "The house is yours, Elizabeth, legally, unequivocally yours. You could evict them if you wanted to." "I don't want to evict them," I replied, "but I do want them to understand the reality of our situation. "What are you planning?" she asked, knowing me well enough to hear the resolve in my voice. "A reality check," I answered. "Can you recommend a good real estate agent?" When I returned home, my parents were preparing to leave for Christmas dinner at my aunt's house. "Aren't you coming?" Mom asked, noticing I wasn't dressed for the gathering. "I have some work to finish," I replied. "Don't wait for me." As soon as their car disappeared down the street, I went to the garage and began painting the plywood. "For sale," in large, neat letters. When it was dry, I hammered it into the front lawn. Then I sat on the porch swing and waited, reviewing property listings on my phone. By the time my parents' car pulled into the driveway 3 hours later, I had already spoken with a real estate agent, scheduled a showing for another house I was interested in, and drafted an email to HR requesting information about relocation packages, as I was considering a transfer to our Seattle office. My parents didn't notice the sign at first. Then Dad slammed on the brakes. They both stared at it, then at me, identical expressions of shock on their faces. "What is this?" Mom demanded, storming up the walkway. "I'm selling the house," I replied calmly. "You can't sell our house." Dad's face was turning an alarming shade of red. "Actually, I can." I pulled out the folder I had prepared, containing copies of the deed transfer from 3 years ago, property tax receipts in my name, and mortgage statements addressed to me. 3 years ago, when you were facing foreclosure, you signed the deed over to me so you could qualify for a loan modification. Remember? The bank required it because my credit score and income were the only things saving this house. The color drained from my mother's face as she looked at the paperwork. Dad snatched it from her hands, flipping through the documents as if looking for a loophole. "This was temporary," he sputtered. "You know that was the agreement." "Yes," I agreed. "Just like my moving in to help with bills was temporary. Just like my using the master bedroom was temporary. Apparently, temporary means something different to each of us." "You can't do this to us," Mom said, tears filling her eyes. "Where would we go?" "I've consulted with a real estate agent," I replied. "The market is strong right now. We should be able to get around $425,000 for the house. After paying off the remaining mortgage of $180,000, that leaves $245,000. I'm prepared to split the proceeds evenly, approximately $82,000 each. That should be enough for you both to make a down payment on a smaller place, perhaps a condo closer to the library where Mom works." "And what about Amber?" Mom asked, voice hardening. "She's counting on moving in next month." "Amber is not my responsibility," I replied. "And frankly, neither are you anymore. I've done my part, more than my part. Now it's time for me to think about my future." The conversation deteriorated from there. There were accusations of betrayal, reminders of all they had done for me growing up, questions about my moral character. I remained calm throughout, which only seemed to infuriate them more. "I never thought you'd be so selfish," Mom finally spat. "Is it selfish to want to be treated with respect?" I asked quietly. "Is it selfish to expect acknowledgement for my contributions? Is it selfish to want a home of my own after paying for everyone else's?" They had no answer for that. The next few weeks were tense. Word spread through the family. Some relatives took my parents' side, calling me heartless for putting my parents out on the street. Others, who knew the full story, supported me. My aunt, Amber's mother, was surprisingly understanding. "They took advantage of you," she told me over coffee. "And for what it's worth, Amber had no idea you were paying all the bills. She thought your parents owned the house free and clear and were doing her a favor by offering a room at reduced rent." The realtor I'd hired, Sophia Martinez, was efficient and professional. The house went on the market January 15th, and we had 3 offers by the 20th. 2 were at asking price. 1 was $15,000 above. I accepted the highest offer with a closing date of February 28th. During those weeks, I also interviewed for a position at our Seattle office, negotiated a relocation package, and made an offer on a waterfront condo with views of Puget Sound. My life, which had been on pause for 3 years, suddenly accelerated into a whirlwind of activity and possibility. My parents, meanwhile, cycled through the stages of grief. Denial gave way to anger, then bargaining. Dad suggested I buy them out instead of selling. Mom proposed a rent-to-own arrangement where they would gradually purchase the house from me. I declined both offers, knowing they couldn't afford either option on their current income. Eventually, they reached acceptance. With my help, they found a 2-bedroom condo in a 55-plus community 10 minutes from the library. The amenities included a clubhouse, pool, and maintenance-free living, features that would actually improve their quality of life. The down payment came from their share of the house proceeds, and their new mortgage payment was manageable on their combined income. As for Amber, she found a roommate situation in the city that actually worked better for her commute. We met for lunch after the dust settled, and she apologized for her unwitting role in the drama. "I had no idea what was really going on," she said, embarrassed. "Aunt Patricia made it sound like you were the one taking advantage of them." "That's how they saw it," I replied, surprised to find I could discuss the situation without bitterness. Perception shapes reality. The day before closing, as I packed the last of my belongings, Mom appeared in the doorway of what had once again become my childhood bedroom. I had moved back downstairs after accepting the sale offer, returning the master bedroom to its original state. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "About respect and acknowledgement." I continued folding sweaters, waiting. "You were right," she admitted finally. "We got comfortable with the arrangement. We took you for granted. When you came back to help us, I think part of me slipped back into seeing you as our child, not as the independent adult you are. I forgot that you were making a sacrifice to be here. It wasn't a grand apology, but it was something, an acknowledgement, at least, of my reality." "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "Will you visit after you move to Seattle?" "Yes," I said, surprising myself with the certainty of my answer. "But as a visitor, not as a caretaker." She nodded, understanding the distinction. Dad was still too proud to apologize directly, but on moving day, he helped load my furniture into the shipping container, then pressed an envelope into my hand. "What's this?" I asked. "The money I should have been giving you all along," he replied gruffly. "It's not everything, but it's what I can do now." Inside was a check for $5,000, a fraction of what I'd spent, but significant given his financial situation. More importantly, it was an acknowledgement of debt, both financial and emotional. The closing went smoothly. The new owners were a young couple with a baby on the way, excited about their first home. As we signed the final paperwork, I felt a weight lifting. Not just the financial burden I'd carried, but the invisible chains of obligation and misplaced guilt. That afternoon, I boarded a plane to Seattle, leaving behind not just a house, but a version of myself I'd outgrown. The dutiful daughter who had prioritized everyone's needs above her own. 6 months have passed since then. My condo overlooking Puget Sound feels more like home than my childhood house ever did after I returned as an adult. My career has flourished with new challenges and responsibilities. I've even started dating again, a marine biologist named David who understands the complexity of family dynamics and respects my boundaries. My relationship with my parents is evolving. We talk weekly by phone. I visited at Easter and was relieved to find they're thriving in their new community. The smaller space suits them, and they've made friends with neighbors in similar life stages. Most importantly, the dynamic between us has shifted. When I visit, I'm treated as an adult guest, not as the teenager they once parented or the caretaker I became. We're finding our way toward a relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial dependency or familial obligation. Sometimes, the hardest lessons come from the people we love most, and sometimes putting a for sale sign on the lawn is the only way to be truly seen. Last week, I received a card from my mother. Inside, Beneath her familiar handwriting was a quote she'd carefully copied. "The price of anything is the amount of life you exchange for it." Below it, she'd added, "Thank you for helping us when we needed it most. I'm sorry it cost you so much. I'm proud of the life you're building now. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to build upon." And as I stood on my balcony, watching the sunset over Puget Sound, I realized that's all any of us can ask for. Not perfect resolution, but enough understanding to move forward. Not the erasure of past hurts, but the wisdom to build something better from their lessons. I had paid a high price for that wisdom. But standing there, finally in a home that was truly mine, watching the future unfold before me like the endless horizon, I knew it had been worth every penny.